I would like to introduce to you Dr. Tanira Kingi. He's going to be talking to us about Takahuri Whenua, which is one of the research programs, the longest running research program in NZACCC. So Tanira is an agricultural economist with over 30 years experience in the New Zealand primary industry sector. He's been with Scion and Ag Research. In fact, he's the reason I probably got to Ag Research. He's been a research scientist in Massey and loads of other accolades in there. A person with lots of experience, and I'd ask him to step up now. Lots of governance experience, but we'll let Tanira speak for himself. Kia ora, everyone.
Thanks, Chris. Tuitai mi mai rā, e ka koutou te haukainga a te atiawa, a taranaki whānui, e tuku atu nā kōrero whakatimatanga o tō tātou hui, e tuku karakia, e whakarite he whakatūwhare ai, e whakatū ana te arapautama ki a mātou i tēnei wā. A tuarua, i mi mai rā kia koutou a tā tātou whanaunga, no te tai rāwhiti, ngō kahungunu, aha ko te uruwehi, te mataku, a tāwhiri mātia, a ka arohatu kia koutou. And good to see you here, Ingrid and Hayden, been able to fly out of Gisborne this morning. Big green button. So today I want to talk to you about on-farm mitigations and land use change. And so the Takahuri Whenua program is what we're calling stage 4 of a research program in a series of stages that started back in 2014. And what I'm going to do is go back and just do a recap of where we've come from over the last 7 years, and then a quick overview of our two-year program now. There was a couple of questions that we focused on in this program. The first was, how do we scale up? Because as you'll see when I go through the early stages, we were doing 2 to 4 farms per program. The current one has got 18 in it, and we're also working with 2 collectives and a partnership. But the other main question is, how does the farming sector, not just the Māori agribusiness sector, because our research is applicable across the board. How do farmers position themselves so that they can take advantage of not only technologies that are coming down the pipeline, but also the market signals and regulations, so that they can make decisions to adjust, to change their systems, to look at land use diversification options, and position themselves to move into the future. So going back to 2014 to 17, one of the first things we did was we did a survey of 29 farms. It was supposed to have been 30. Some of you will have seen this slide from earlier presentations to the conference. We wanted to understand what a profile was of the Māori sector, just based on a small sample. And what we found was the sheep and beef sector was very similar at around 3.9 tonnes per hectare. But the dairy systems that we had in this sample were larger and running intensive systems, and so the average of those was higher than the average for the industry. We had 4 case studies spread around the country, 2 sheep and beef, 2 dairy, and right at the bottom was the original team starting back in 2014 when I was with Ag Research, and it was very Ag Research and Scion heavy. So the team has changed shape recently, in more recent years, I should say. This is one of the examples of our case studies. They had been thinking about moving to a techno beef system, mainly because of the revenue advantages that it gave, but they hadn't made that step. When we did the modelling for them and we showed that they could make these changes with not only to increase their revenue, but to also improve their greenhouse gas profile by shrinking the platform, shrinking their beef platform, and working, having a system that was more intensive on a smaller area, and then planting trees. So that was one of the first case studies that we worked with, where they made a deliberate decision to intensify on a smaller area and improve the efficiencies of it, but then look at other ways of increasing their sequestration in other parts. The second program, starting in 2017 to 2019, we just had 2 case studies in that one. Both of them were a very similar size, around 2,500 hectares. One in the King Country, the other one in the Bay of Plenty. And they were both already diversified. So we wanted to understand, well, what drove their decisions, their strategic decisions over many, many years to be diversified. And it came down to a couple of things. And one is their responsibilities that they have as being elected representatives of their owners to maintain the hunga tiaki, or the tiakitanga, or kaitiakitanga as you would know it as, and their responsibilities and their requirements to meet that as the expectations from their owners. And part of that was also to be able to maintain sustainable revenues. So we've had two very well run and well organised organisations. Ōnuku Trust has won the Ahu Whenua Trophy once for dairy, and come a very close second equal for sheep and beef last year, and Tiuringa was a finalist as well. So very, very good operations. And Ōnuku has, with the work that we did, the modelling that we did for them, they were able to confirm their decision to go into dairy sheep, and they're also now leading a collective of other blocks within the Bay of Plenty, well, in the central North Island, on a dairy sheep collective. The third stage, we looked at what are the changes that need to be made on farms to meet the targets, the climate change targets that you'd all be familiar with now, and we talked about this morning. And what the outputs that we produce for this research include maps of current status and alternatives, and also profiles of their current state using key economic indicators, environmental indicators, and others as required by the farms. This one here is a dairy farm system in the Bay of Plenty. You're probably not able to see the numbers up there, but you can see that when we reduce the stocking rate by 10% without any improvements in productivity, there was a drop in EBIT. Once we improved the profitability using FarmX, you can see there that the increases in EBIT and the reductions in total greenhouse gas emissions increased significantly. And one of the reasons why we had such a large increase in productivity was really based on the theoretical assumptions inside FarmX. One of the farm managers said, "Well, that'll take us years to get to that point." And I said, "Well, at least you've got a plan now. These changes won't happen overnight, but you've got to be able to put the systems in incrementally." Stage 3. So that particular organisation, as part of stage 3, also looked at kiwifruit intensification, and the other block where we've got members here from Papatūānuku Trust used the modelling work that we did there to understand what their options were in alternative forestry regimes. So at this point, I just want to acknowledge the partners in those early stages to where we've got to now. The names are listed there, but also in year 1 we had 30 entities which were also part of the development of what we have now with Takahuri Whenua. Takahuri Whenua means, the definition of it is the changing land. All of the other prior programs, we were just known as the Māori program. But this time, we thought we should have a name that actually describes the intention of what we're doing. And the focus was on both diversification and systems changes. Essentially, the decision support framework that we've got, a large component of that is modelling. So you'll see there that there are the standard systems modelling tools that you'll find in the industry, from Farmax, Overseer, Forecaster, so for sequestration, sitting on top of an ArcGIS platform. It also links in with Toy2 and Farm IQ. It's got that capability to join up with that. And for horticulture, we've got a number of one-off spreadsheet models that we use as part of the modelling. We've come up with a 10-point method that I won't go through, because there are really 5 key parts to this. And one is that first step is we talk to the owners to find out what their priorities and preferences are, where they want to go, and that includes the owners, the managers, and the advisors. We look at objectives, and we collect the on-farm data to go into the models. We then model the status quo to get on key indicators. So we get a status quo based platform model. We agree on the land use changes and the systems changes, and then we model those and we reconfigure the base platform, which is usually a shrinking of that platform, increasing the productivity of it or the performance of it, and then looking at alternatives for the others. And then we look at the total emissions profile and economic profile together, and that's the input, the starting point for a more detailed discussion that the owners will have around going into a due diligence process. What we don't provide is information that the owners can take to a bank to apply for finance. This is the first step to understand the relativities between the options. So stage 4, Takahuri Whenua. The approach here is quite different to where we've come from. We're now focusing on collectives. We have gone from 3 to 4 farms a year to 18 in the 2-year program that we've got. I've got the list of the organisations there, 2 collectives and one partnership, and we've got representatives of the collectives in these organisations with us here today. One of the key questions that we were looking at is how do we build on the tribal connections, the whakawhanaungatanga between the organisations within the collectives, but also across collectives, to be able to leverage scale and to leverage the mindset and the thinking to push the systems beyond where they currently are and where they've come from to where they need to be, to not only to meet regulated requirements in climate change, but also freshwater. The freshwater farm plans exposure draft is currently being finalised and on its way to the minister right now. But that's the other side of the policy pincer, you might as well say, around the changes that you make that improve, that lower your greenhouse gas emissions may not be enough to be able to meet freshwater targets. So that needs to be part of the balance as well. One of the things that we did with the collectives is that we put the farms together and we came across averages, and don't take any notice of the numbers. $85 a tonne right now is, this was a number that we were given, but going forward, we don't know what the pricing will be. But what's important about this slide is it did give insights for the landowners, the owners, and the management teams around what is coming forward and the relativity between the reduction in EBIT on a typical livestock farm compared to dairy. And this was then able for us the work with these organisations to start looking at the question of diversification beyond the usual options that we have now, or the common options that we have now. So if you're a dairy farm inside a horticultural belt, then you've got a reasonable number of options to move into horticulture. If you're outside of horticultural belts and you're enrolling to hard hill country farming, your options are fewer. But we did have a number of comments from our farmers in Tūwharetoa and Tairāwhiti, who were predominantly, well, all of them were livestock, sheep and beef, that they had a lot of experience in growing arable crops for stock feed, but they knew how to grow crops. But there were a number of constraints for them to be able to consider that as a viable alternative for them to shrink their animal system, to then look for alternative revenue streams to take that up. And many of them said that we can grow the crops. We don't have the genetics for it just yet. There is no supply chain, there's no infrastructure into processing, there's no market or distribution channels. So we talked about being positioned and being ready to move should that investment happen, and it needs to happen sooner rather than later. And I think the rebuilds in some of the parts of our rural sector will help reframe that, so that investment does go into not just rebuilding where we've come from, but what we need to do. And just some images there of the range of crops in alternative plant protein. New forestry or wood products, and also biofuels, bioenergy and biopolymers. All of these are options for our sector, but without investment into supply chains and distribution channels, they still sit on the shelf until such time as the rest of the downstream players in the chain have that investment to provide options for farmers. This is my second to last slide. And one of the, as we came together last year with the collectives, how am I doing for time? Oh, right, okay. Well, it sounds like I'm going to finish early. So this is one of the questions that came out when we got the three collectives together. That is, what are your priorities to work? And they came up with a range of things. But one of the options, one of the ideas that they had was based on the fact that organisations or farms that join collectives tend to be those that are in the well-organised, well-resourced end of the scale. What about the smaller farmers? What about those that don't have the people and the technical infrastructure inside their organisation? What happens to them? And so one of the ideas was to develop a survey inside the collectives, but across all three collectives, to find out who these other smaller players were, medium to smaller participants in the sector. And so that question actually built on work that we have been doing inside Takahuri Whenua for the past couple of years, and that is using existing data sets through the Māori Land Court to identify the organisations, and then to also identify the owner representatives in those organisations, and using the networks of the collectives, the existing collectives, organisations, and using the knowledge of who's on the ground to be able to make contact with these organisations, approach them, and then bring them into the fold. Not the fold of the collective. I think the collective here has got its. They were designed for a particular purpose at that time, but the objective here is to make sure that to design something that reaches out to others. And so the aim of Takahuri Whenua as we go forward really is to develop a methodology where we can scale up. And one of the things that we are looking at is instead of relying on on consultants who are very, very good. This is good old consultancy work where they sit down with the farmer to understand what their priorities are, to get the farm data that's needed to be able to go into the models. We need to be able to shortcut that and have an online portal system where farmers where they want to participate in a program like this can upload their farm data. What we lose in accuracy of the data, we gain in more farmers at least being able to have baseline models and other models of alternatives where they can understand the relativities of where they could be versus standing still. So I might leave it at that. Chris? Kia ora, everyone.